After almost 14 years of bloody and deadly civil war, the Assad regime has finally collapsed, with Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, ruling the capital. This marks the end of a tyrannical 50-year dynasty that Syria has had to painfully endure. On the 8th of December, exactly 9 days after the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham led the rebel coalition that took over Aleppo, Syrian rebels appeared on state television to announce the fall of President Bashar al-Assad's regime. They declared that they had captured Damascus, the capital city, effectively ending the Ba'athist rule in Syria. This announcement sent shockwaves throughout the world, with everyone wondering, what comes next? Even President-elect Donald Trump took to Truth Social to type a lengthy and graphic message about this. Within the nation itself, the streets have erupted into celebrations, with thousands of people taking to the streets, waving flags and chanting, "Freedom!" This advance started on November 29th, when Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, popularly known as the HDS, an Islamist rebel group, seized control of Aleppo. This victory was part of a broader, well-coordinated offensive that saw the rebels capturing several key cities in quick succession, including Hama and Homs. These victories were pivotal because they allowed the HDS to amass momentum and resources, positioning them for their advance on Damascus. As the rebels approached the capital, they employed strategic planning and tactical maneuvers to weaken government defenses. The Syrian army, already strained by years of conflict and defections, abandoned by their allies like Russia and Iran, struggled to mount a strong defense. This weakening of government forces was a crucial factor that facilitated the rebels' swift advances. The rebels then strategically targeted key military installations and infrastructure, disrupting the regime's ability to coordinate its defenses. On December 1st, the rebels made significant gains by capturing Damascus International Airport, cutting off vital supply and escape routes for the Assad regime. Following this, the rebels advanced on strategic military positions, including the Sadnaya military prison, which held many political prisoners and was a symbol of Assad's repressive regime. On top of crushing a symbolic stronghold, it also added more troops to the ranks, bolstering their armies. As the past week advanced, it became clear that the rebels were closing in on Damascus. The Syrian army's defenses continued to crumble under the pressure of the coordinated rebel attacks. As the rebels advanced into the city, there were reports of sporadic clashes, but overall, the government forces offered little resistance. Their loyalty was also in question, something that we will explore later in the video. This lack of organized defense indicated the regime's weakened state and the diminishing loyalty among Assad's troops. On the 8th of December 2024, the rebels officially announced their control over Damascus on state television. They also announced how Bashar al-Assad had colonized the country. Now it was independently confirmed that Assad and his family members arrived in Moscow, where they were under the protection of his fellow dictator Putin. His departure signaled the complete collapse of the regime. The Prime Minister has been escorted out of his home by rebel fighters in a move that's meant to symbolize a transference of power. In a speech broadcast on his Facebook account, Syrian Prime Minister Mohammed al-Jalali said, "This country can be a normal country." The speed and efficiency of this overall rebel offensive left little room for the regime to regroup, get help, or counterattack, and now they have been utterly crushed. This truly marks the end of the Assad regime. There is a reason why the rebels put so much effort into concentrating their attacks on Damascus instead of other potential strongholds. The fall of Damascus and the collapse of the Assads have always been interlinked, and hence one has led to the other. Damascus holds immense significance in the Syrian conflict for several reasons that intertwine politics, history, strategy, and symbolism. As the capital city, Damascus serves as the political and administrative heart of Syria. It's where the central government operates, making it the primary seat of power. Even looking at this strategically, Damascus is crucial due to its central location. It acts as a hub for transportation and communication networks throughout the country. Controlling Damascus allows the rebels to disrupt the regime's ability to coordinate military and logistical operations effectively. Understanding the Assad regime. For some of you, looking at the situation from outside Syria, it can be hard to properly understand the reactions of the Syrians when you watch videos like this. To understand it better, first let me take you into the nitty-gritty details of the Assad regime so that you can have the full picture. Hafez al-Assad's rise to power. It all began in 1970 with what is known as the corrective movement. Hafez al-Assad, then a member of the Syrian Air Force, orchestrated a coup d'etat that ousted the existing leadership of the Ba'ath Party and government. The coup was relatively bloodless, but marked the beginning of Assad's long rule over Syria. Hafez al-Assad came from the Alawite minority, a sect of Shia Islam that made up a small fraction of Syria's population. Despite their minority status, Hafez managed to consolidate power within the military and the Ba'ath Party, which had been a dominant political force in Syria since the 1960s. By promoting fellow Alawites to key positions, Hafez ensured a loyal power base that would support him throughout his rule. This strategic move helped solidify his control over the country, despite the sectarian diversity and tensions within Syria. Hafez al-Assad's regime was characterized by a cult of personality. Hafez's image and slogans were omnipresent, reinforcing his authority and the idea of him as the father of modern Syria. This omnipresence was not just for show. It was a strategic tool to instill loyalty and suppress dissent. When Hafez al-Assad died in 2000, his son Bashar al-Assad took over the presidency. The transition to Bashar's rule was somewhat smooth, as it had been orchestrated well in advance. Bashar, an ophthalmologist by training, was initially seen as a potential reformer, and there was a hope that he would bring a more modern and open approach to the Syrian government. True to form, in the early years of Bashar's rule, there were indeed some signs of reform. He allowed for a brief period of political openness known as the Damascus Spring, where intellectuals and civil society groups were permitted to express their views more freely. However, this period was short-lived. The initial reforms quickly gave way to repression, as Bashar's regime clamped down on dissent, fearing it would undermine their authority. Bashar was exactly the opposite of what people hoped for, as he turned out to be a ruthless dictator, no different from his father. The Arab Spring protests in 2011 were a period when people across the Arab world started demanding more freedom, democracy, and an end to authoritarian rule. Inspired by successful uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt, where the citizens had forced their presidents to resign, Syrians took to the streets with similar hopes. The trigger events for Syria's protests were particularly heartbreaking, as in the southern city of Daraa, a group of teenagers were arrested and tortured for writing anti-regime graffiti.